Good morning, boys and girls. I hope that you have all had a great long weekend, and we're going to get started today with our read aloud of Witherwood. I know that you guys are all anxiously awaiting to find out what happens today. I'm going to be reading two chapters, chapters 14 and chapters 15. I will stop midway through for you to pause the video so you can write your summary over chapter 14, and then once you are done writing that, or typing it, then you can hit play again and continue to hear the second chapter. And at the end of that, write another chapter summary and then upload that to me in Canvas. And then you are done with reading today and then move on to writing. So let's get started with Witherwood. Chapter 14. Remember that we left off in chapter 13 with they went back to their room. Ms. Gulp locked them into their room, and they were so tired that they slept for 15 hours. Chapter 14, a little more learned. There is something about getting 15 hours of sleep that makes a previously exhausted person view the world a lot more positively. There is also something sort of painful about fully understanding how bad your situation is because you are now wide awake. And there is the weird way you might feel if someone's voice had altered your mind and made you forget all your troubles. Ms. Gulp stepped up to Tobias's cot and put her loud, mushy mouth a few inches away from his right ear. "Morning!" Tobias's body sprang upward a few inches and then snapped back onto his cot. "You too, pointy ears," she hollered at Charlotte. Both of them sat up slowly and yawned. They looked at each other and shrugged. "You'll need to wear these," Miss Gulp said, throwing a small pile of clothes at both of them. "I'm sick of looking at your filthy rags. You have 10 minutes to wash up and change. I'll be waiting in the hall." Ms. Gulp creaked across the floor and left the room. Tobias gazed at Charlotte and smiled. "I feel different." "Yeah, me too." "What happened yesterday?" Charlotte couldn't remember, so she just yawned again. Tobias looked at the clothes Miss Gulp had given him. He held up a small white shirt and a plaid skirt. "I think those are mine," Charlotte said. Charlotte used the washroom first. She took a 2-minute shower and then put on the plaid skirt, white blouse, knee socks, and black flats she had been given. She tossed her old clothes into the corner of the bathroom as if she was tossing away hope. She left her blonde hair wet and hanging in front of her ears. When she came out, Tobias wanted to laugh, but his head was still foggy. Tobias took his turn. As he was taking off his clothes, he was happy to find 2 pins in his pocket, but he was shocked to see all the scratches on his body. He was most surprised by the large red marks on his shoulder. When he combed his hand through the back of his hair, he discovered a clump missing. "Weird," he said while looking at the mirror. It took him less than 5 minutes to shower and change. He then joined his sister and Miss Gulp in the hall. The uniform Tobias had been given consisted of black corduroy trousers and a collared white shirt with a gray V-neck sweater. There was a red striped tie included, but he had no idea how to put it on, so he had just thrown it around his neck like a scarf. Seeing this, Miss Gulp pulled it off of him and began to roughly work it around his neck. Tobias choked as she tightened the knot. Despite her attempt to strangle him, Tobias said, "Thank you." Miss Gulp stared at him with her fat eyes. Her breath smelled like wet garbage, and there were sweat stains showing beneath her armpits. A single long hair was sticking out from her right nostril. "It's obvious Marvin talked to you. Things should run better now." You seemed meaner before, Tobias said. Watch your tongue, Miss Gulp warned, her red hair pinned back so tightly that her face looked like a blotchy plastic mask. I'm exactly the same person. Now, come with me, or you'll be late. All three of them walked through the weary hall to the arched doors leading out into the gardens. Outside it was raining, and the trees and bushes hung their branches, seeming depressed about the weather. Tobias glanced around as they trudged down the stone corridor that ran alongside the gardens. Were we here last night? He asked, confused. Don't ask me that, Miss Gulp barked as she marched 2 paces ahead of them. I detest inquisitive children. What good can come of a child's question? Tobias tried asking Charlotte. Were we here last night? Don't ask her questions either, Miss Gulp sniffed. Charlotte looked at her brother and shrugged. They entered a severe hall. Just so you don't ask me later, Severe Hall is where most of the schoolrooms are, Miss Gulp said. It's time for you to make something of yourselves. You know, give to the cause. It's important to point out that some words seem to have impact beyond their consonants and vowels. Yes, sinister inflection can turn harmless little letters into statements of dread and uneasiness. Had the Eggers kids been clear-minded, they would have turned and run because of the way Miss Gulp had said, give to the cause. But their minds were still covered in the goo of Marvin's voice. So Charlotte said, that sounds fun. Inside Severe Hall, the walls were paneled with dark wood that ran from floor to ceiling. The windows were filled with textured glass that allowed light through in thin yellow streaks. There were tree-shaped chandeliers hanging from dusty black chains, and a large painting on the wall showed the image of a child riding a lion. At the end of the hall was a single door with a small plaque that read, Learning Annex. Ms. Gulp opened the door. Go in! Tobias and Charlotte stepped into the classroom, followed by Ms. Gulp. Dozens of desks filled the room, and dozens of students filled the desk. Everyone turned to stare. The other students were dressed in the same uniforms. There looked to be an even number of girls and boys. The walls in the classroom were covered with fuzzy brown burlap that muffled any noise in the room. 2 plants hung in the far corners, their long branches spilling out of their pots and touching the floor like leafy octopi. In the front of the classroom, there was a man leaning on the edge of an old desk. Behind him was a wall-sized chalkboard with sketches of various animals and numbers on it. The man's arms and legs were as thin as twigs, and his head was sharp and covered with scruffy, bark-colored hair. He was obviously the teacher, but he didn't look as ancient as the rest of the Witherwood staff. He had a quick smile that he displayed the second Tobias and Charlotte entered. Come, he waved. You must be the new students I keep hearing about. Have a seat here in the front. The teacher pointed to a couple of empty desks in the front row. Tobias and Charlotte shuffled over to them. They're spirited, so teach them quickly, Miss Gulp said. Orrin wants them on the fast track. Time matters with these 2. I'll have them ready, the teacher assured her. Up to speed, ASAP. Miss Gulp slammed the door behind her, causing every student in the room to jump. Introductions are in order, the teacher said in a soft voice. I'm Professor Jacob Himzikadi. If it helps, you can remember it by thinking about someone pointing at me and saying, him's a kitty. Understand? Tobias kind of nodded, but Charlotte just stared at him. And your names? He asked. I'm Tobias and she's Charlotte. Well, Tobias and Charlotte, this is adaptation class. You will be brought here every day by Ms. Gulp until I feel you are ready to come on your own. Okay? Neither one of them nodded. I will teach you what you need to know. Deal? Yes, Charlotte said, her ears twitching slightly. Tobias thought about saying yes as well, but for some reason his brain was acting up, and something wasn't connecting right. Maybe it was the years of being mischievous, or the fact that he had never taken instruction well, and now he was getting way too much of it. Maybe it was the deja vu-like feelings he was having, the memories of the gardens and of things that may or may not have happened there. Or perhaps it was the odd scratches and bruises he had on his body. Whatever it wasn't sitting well with his brain. "And you, Professor Himsakitty?" asked Tobias. "Will you be respectful so I can shape your mind?" Tobias nodded. Fantastic. Tobias and Charlotte slowly looked around the room. Right behind them was a large boy with dark skin and no hair. Next to him were two girls who were obviously twins. Both had long brown hair and stout, pale noses. There were too many other sets of eyes and faces to take in. All the students were quiet, and only the bald-headed boy acknowledged them by giving a slight nod. "Now," Professor Himsakitty said, "I know it's hard to stay focused with the parade just days away, but we've much to learn and only your youth to learn it in." He pulled open one of his desk drawers and withdrew a textbook. He walked over to Tobias's desk and slapped it down. "You'll need to share with your sister." Tobias stared at the front of the book. The cover was a collage of different animal pictures. In one top corner was a picture of a frog. The image jogged something in Tobias's mind, and he spoke without thinking. "Tadpoles?" Yes, Professor Himsakitty said happily. "We will study the frog and its adaptive properties starting next month. For now, however, we are thinking about insects." Tobias looked at his smiling sister and begged his mind to kick in. He felt contented, but he knew he shouldn't. He scooted his desk a little bit closer to Charlotte's so they could share the book. Professor Himsakitty talked fast and repeated the same facts over and over. "Crickets can hear using their legs. Crickets can hear using their legs." The professor then made all the students chant what he had said back at him. After 3 hours of this unusual recitation, a couple of attendants wheeled in a lunch cart. The cart was filled with food, sandwiches, chocolate pudding, and drinks. One of the attendants clapped, and the students got up and began to pick what they wanted from the cart. Everyone was given 2 mandatory servings of pudding. Tobias was surprised to notice that his food had no smell. It hardly had any taste as well. The bald boy looked up from his food and smiled at Tobias. "I'm Archie." Tobias and Charlotte nodded in acknowledgement. "People say I'm friendly, but I can't always remember if I am." "You are," Charlotte said. "I must have learned that growing up," Archie said proudly. "Where'd you grow up?" Tobias asked. Archie tilted his head and scrunched his forehead. "What do you mean?" "I mean, where are you from?" "Well, I can't really remember." "Well, maybe he was born at school," Charlotte joined in. "Maybe," Archie said. "I can't remember being anywhere else. Where are you from?" "I'm not sure," Tobias answered in a confused tone. "Michigan?" "That doesn't sound right," Charlotte said. "It probably isn't," Tobias admitted. "I guess I can't remember either." A few more students gathered around Tobias and Charlotte and began to point at Charlotte's ears and ask them meaningless questions. The Eggers kids tried their best to answer, but their brains were failing them. When there was a break in the interrogation, Tobias decided to ask a question himself. "What's Student Morale Day?" "Just one of the best days of the year," Archie answered for everyone. "The teachers put on an amazing parade, and you get to clap and wave as much as you want. 2 years ago, Professor Himsakitty tossed out mints from his parade float." "Sounds great," Charlotte said. It was. In fact, people are still talking about it. I know I am. Archie smiled. Witherwood really is a wonderful place. You two are lucky to be here. "We know that," Charlotte said. A bell sounded and the students shuffled back to their seats. Archie looked at Tobias and smiled. Professor Hemsakitty called the class to order as the attendants took the cart and left. "Well," the professor said smugly, "I hope you enjoyed the food we provided you." Charlotte nodded, while Tobias stared at the cover of his book, begging his brain to hurry up and kick in. Professor Hemsakitty looked at Tobias and Charlotte. "Why don't you two scoot your desk even closer?" he suggested. "It will be easier for you to focus on the book." Tobias grabbed the edge of his desk and jerked it toward Charlotte's. Charlotte, thinking it was her responsibility to move closer to him, jerked hers toward him at the same time. As a result, her desk jammed directly into Tobias's fingers. It was the kind of hit that would make even the toughest person wince, like stubbing your toe hard against a metal table leg on a very cold night and then taking a whack at it with a sledgehammer. The sharp bolt of pain shot through Tobias's arm and up to his brain. Tobias leapt from his desk, screaming and waving his hand. Professor Hemsakitty put both of his hands on his cheeks and howled like a sympathetic stick. Everyone else just watched Tobias's embarrassing dance and tried not to laugh. After about 30 seconds, Tobias settled down and slipped back into his chair. "Sorry," Charlotte said. Tobias wanted to holler a bit more, but there was something about the horrific, shocking pain that had cleared a small portion of his head. He shook his wounded fingers and stared at his sister. "Don't worry about it," he finally said. Professor Hemsakitty stepped over and looked at Tobias's fingers. "They don't appear to be broken," he said. "You'll have some tremendous swelling." Tobias kept quiet as his fingers throbbed. Professor Hemsakitty walked back to the front and began to lecture about the need for obedience and how the world had forgotten its importance. It struck a partially clear-minded Tobias that what his professor was now teaching didn't seem to have much to do with animals. All right, so boys and girls, what I want you to do now is pause the video and go ahead and write your summary for chapter 14. Remember, in your summary, you're including what happened at the beginning, the middle, and the end, and any important events that took place. When you finish, then hit play again to hear the next chapter. Chapter 15. A taxi driver named Sam. Sometimes the things we don't understand are frightening. I don't understand algebra as much as I should. That's why I would hate to run into algebra in a dark alley. Tobias had been in a happy, foggy state, but now his brain was reminding him that there were a lot of things at Witherwood he didn't understand. Strangely, he couldn't decide whether he should be happy or terrified. Ralph Eggers looked out the taxi's window, desperately searching for any sign of something he might remember. Life had been very strenuous the last couple of days as he had come to grips with not knowing who he was. It was hard to function when you couldn't remember your own name. You and I might know he's Ralph Eggers, but he surely did not. Physically, Ralph was in good shape, aside from the broken arm and a few small cuts. After the doctor had discovered Ralph's amnesia, the hospital had kept him an additional 3 days for testing. What they learned was that Ralph had lost all of his personal memories. He could remember how to eat, but he couldn't remember a single meal he had ever eaten. Likewise, he knew there were 50 states, but he couldn't remember if he had ever visited any of them. He was perfectly healthy, but he was missing his memories. The hospital checked with the police to see if there were any missing persons, but none had been reported. So, needing the bed space, they had discharged Ralph. Having nowhere else to go, he headed to the local YMCA to live until he figured out who he was or until somebody came looking for him. Mr. Eggers checked into the YMCA and immediately called a taxi. The Red Cross had given him a few $100s before he left the hospital to help him get back on his feet. So Ralph used some of that money to pay for the taxi he was now riding in. The taxi driver was a medium-sized fellow with a big belly. He had wiry black hair that was thinning unevenly on the top. His eyes were close together, and his nose was smashed over to the right side. His taxi smelled like beef jerky and bubblegum. Ralph had chosen to sit up in the passenger seat so he wouldn't feel like he was being chauffeured. "And you don't even know your name?" the taxi driver asked in amazement as they drove along the freeway through the desolate outskirts of town. "No," Ralph said sadly. "One of the nurses called me Blank because I'm sort of like a blank piece of paper." "Blank's not the worst name," the taxi driver said. "I got a cousin named Stunk." "Really? I guess I should be happy with Blank then. What's your name?" "Sam." "Pretty boring, I know. So you don't remember anything." Ralph nodded. "No fooling? And you aren't just pretending to avoid paying some bills or to get away from someone who's after you?" "I don't think so." "Well, how'd you break that arm?" "I don't know. I can't remember anything." "Well, then where are we going?" "Well, the doctor gave me the name of the rancher who found me. I thought I'd talk to him first." "You think he'll know something?" "Maybe. There has to be a reason I was wandering out here. I mean, look at this place. There's nothing." "Yep, it's a lonely desert. I don't know why anyone would come out here. But it's going to cost you. This isn't exactly a short drive, and gas ain't free these days." "I know," Ralph said. "No memory at all," Sam said, whistling. "That's something. What about a wife or kids?" "Not sure. I wasn't wearing a wedding ring when they found me." Maybe you were trying to get away from something," Sam said, playing detective. "Maybe you were running from the law." "I don't feel like a criminal." "Nah," Sam waved one hand dismissively. "And you don't look like one. Of course, my cousin Stunk looks pretty clean, and he's no good." "I'm sorry to hear that." "Yeah, so's his mother," Sam added. "I'm not sure there's much hope for Stunk, but it'll be interesting to see if this rancher has some answers for you." Ralph nodded. "It's kind of like you were adopted and we're trying to find where you came from," Sam said. "I guess you're right. You and I are sort of alike. You have no ties that you know of, and neither do I. I drive this taxi because I don't want anyone telling me what to do. I can work as much or as little as I please, and I have no wife and children to go home to." "I guess that's good," Ralph said skeptically. "I don't know. Maybe it ain't that great." "Yeah," Ralph agreed. Sam pressed on the gas pedal and headed down the freeway toward the address Ralph had given him, 2527 Battered Cactus Road. And that's the end of the chapter, boys and girls. So you are going to write another summary over that chapter. I know it's short, but what have we learned in that chapter? What were the important events? Okay, we've learned a new character and something that Ralph Eggers, the children's father, is doing. Make an inference at the end. Do you think he's going to find out some information in the next chapter? You will have to wait until Wednesday to find out. Here's your clue for the next one. Chapter 16, Student Morale Day. I can't wait to see you tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your day. Get your writing and get them submitted on Canvas, and get your work done for Mrs. LeNeveu, and we will see you guys tomorrow. Bye.